Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind address the theme, crossing new frontiers to conquer today's challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, St. Augustine.
It's mistakenly believed that serendipity or luck must always play a role in making a scientific discovery or in making a technological invention. There's nothing serendipitous about my experimental discovery that occurred on the 4th of July of 1989 of how and why the massively parallel processing supercomputer could be used to execute the fastest floating point arithmetical computations and record that fastest calculations across an ensemble of millions upon millions of commodity off-the-shelf processors that are identical to each other and that were equal distances are far and apart from each other. Prior to my experimental discovery of massively parallel processing that occurred on the 4th of July of 1989, the central debate of supercomputing was that supercomputer scientists accepted Amdahl's law limit that limited the maximum speed up to a factor of 8 that I could attain across my global network of 64 binary 1000 commodity processors. Supercomputer scientists accepted Amdahl's hypothesized but untrue maximum speed up. That acceptance meant that I was attempting to do the impossible and to attain a linear speed up, and to do so across my global network of 64 binary 1000 commodity processors that computed in parallel or solved 64 binary 1000 computational physics problems at once. The supercomputing community uncritically accepted Amdahl's law and accepted it without demanding for the evidence that it is true or that it is even a law. For me, Philip Emeagwali, my mathematical journey to the abstract unknown world of the partial differential equation of modern mathematics began from the embers, that is a small piece of burning charcoal, of the 30-month-long Nigeria-Biafra Civil War. My journey was from the war front to the science front. My technological quest for the then unknown massively parallel supercomputer that can be used as an instrument of physics and used for solving 64 binary 1000 computational physics problems and used for solving them at once ended with 64 binary 1000 startling voices in Silicon Valley, California. My experimental discovery of parallel processing had to be preceded by my theoretical discovery of parallel processing. My experimental discovery of the precursor to the modern supercomputer was the end product of my mixture of abstract calculus and advanced algebra and fastest parallel processing supercomputing. The experimental discoverer of parallel processing must be a triple threat that is simultaneously at the frontier of knowledge in computational physics, at the frontier of knowledge in computational mathematics, and at the frontier of knowledge in massively parallel processing supercomputing. That discoverer must possess both the intellect and the knowledge, as well as the financial resources needed to acquire the most expensive supercomputer in the world. The fastest supercomputer costs the budget of a small nation. With that price tag, I cannot log into the fastest supercomputer by serendipity or luck. As an extreme scale computational physicist, I had to know what I was doing to be the sole programmer of the fastest supercomputer of the 1980s. As a large-scale computational mathematician, I had to know what I was doing on each of the 16 supercomputers that I programmed alone in the 16 years onward of June 20, 1974. Why was a young black and African supercomputer scientist given charge of 16 massively parallel processing supercomputers? The reason was this: in the 1970s and 80s, vector processing supercomputers that then cost $40 million each were reserved for only white supercomputer scientists. At that time, the parallel processing supercomputer was abandoned, dismissed, and mocked as a waste of everybody's time. In the 1980s, I alone was logged into 16 massively parallel processing supercomputers. For me, Philip Emeagwali, and on the 4th of July of 1989, there was no accidental discovery of massively parallel processing. The reason was that I executed the most computation-intensive floating-point arithmetical calculations and calculated how to solve a grand challenge problem in extreme-scale computational physics and solve it at the fastest recorded speed. How I accomplished that fastest speed is too detailed to be described in 1 hour and requires at least a 100 one-hour lecture series. Given a full-breadth lecture series on how I experimentally discovered massively parallel processing and discovered it across a global network of processors, that is a new internet, it's almost like giving a lecture series titled The Complete History of the Universe. The high points of my quest for how and why parallel processing makes modern computers faster and makes modern supercomputers fastest include my discovery of how to solve the most large-scale system of linear equations of algebra that occurs in petroleum reservoir modeling of the flow of oil and gas within oil fields. The high points of my quest for what makes massively parallel processing supercomputers fastest include my discovery that I could solve the most abstract system of coupled nonlinear, and time-dependent partial differential equations of modern mathematics, called Emeagwali's equations. The reputation of these equations earned them a place of honor in the list of 20 grand challenge problems that are computational testbeds for all supercomputers. In the 1980s, these grand challenge problems were impossible to massively parallel process across 64 binary thousand processors. Each processor had its own operating system and memory. It was also considered impossible to massively parallel process across 64 binary thousand computers that enshrouded a globe and encircled it as a global network of computers that are identical to each other and that were equal distances afar and apart from each other. Looking back, in 1946, the fastest computer in the world computed with only one scalar processing unit. In 1988, the fastest computer in the world still computed with only one vector processing unit. Shortly after my experimental discovery of the 4th of July of 1989, it made the news headlines that an African supercomputer wizard in the United States of America had experimentally discovered how the most massively parallel processing supercomputer ever built can massively parallel compute and compute with 65,536 commodity processors and solve 65,536 computational physics problems simultaneously. I am that African supercomputer scientist that was in the news in 1989. My discovery opened the door to the new world of fastest supercomputing, where the large-scale computational physicist can massively parallel process across 10 binary million commodity processors. After a 10 binary million-fold increase in the speed of computation, it's not unreasonable to expect another 100-fold increase that could enable the fastest supercomputer of tomorrow to massively parallel process and to do so across 1 binary billion commodity processors that each had its own operating system and memory, or to do so across 1 binary billion identical computers on the internet of maybe the 22nd century. That experimental discovery of parallel processing or parallel computing many initial boundary value problems of calculus and physics and solving them at once instead of sequentially solving one computational problem at a time is the answer to the often asked question, quote unquote, what did Philip Emeagwali contribute to the development of the computer? I was asked, is there beauty in the mathematics used to theoretically discover parallel processing? If so, did that beauty help you to experimentally discover parallel processing? My set of floating point arithmetical operations is detailed, and its beauty is visible only to the arithmetician. My system of equations of a new algebra is abstract, and its beauty is visible only to the algebraist. My system of coupled nonlinear and time-dependent partial differential equations of a new calculus was used to define some of the grand challenges of computational physics, and its beauty is visible only to the grand wizards of calculus. My geometrical illustrations were described as beautiful because the beauty of a geometrical object is self-evident. What attracted eyeballs to my experimental discovery of parallel processing across my new hyperbole supercomputer was my 1970s geometrical illustrations of the paths that I parallel processed my emails through. Unlike a system of coupled nonlinear and time-dependent partial differential equations of modern mathematics that's abstract, invincible, and very ugly, my geometrical illustrations of my new hyperbole and new cosmic supercomputers were concrete, visible, and very beautiful. It's beautiful to look at the bidirectional edges, to look at the one-to-one correspondence to the as many email wires that interconnected 64 binary thousand vertices and did so with a one-to-one correspondence to 64 binary thousand commodity processors or to 64 binary thousand identical computers. I might add that the beauty in mathematics differs from the beauty in music or in a novel. A song and a story entertain. However, my mathematical equation or my computer algorithm is functional at the low level and intellectual at the abstract level. Before my experimental discovery that occurred on the 4th of July of 1989, the leaders of thought in the world of supercomputing ridiculed parallel processing as a beautiful theory that lacked experimental confirmation. Parallel processing is beautiful if and only if it parallel processed perfectly and became the driving force behind all computers and the fastest supercomputers.
Insightful and brilliant lecture.